Let's look at the heresy of Nestorius and the response of the Council of Ephesus. The key insight of the Nestorian heresy is that Mary, the mother of Jesus, is not Theotokos, that's Greek for mother of God. Instead, Nestorius said, she is Christotokos, bearer of Christ. That implied in the minds of some people a denial of the divinity of Jesus. So this great Christological heresy arrived with Nestorius. Nestorius was appointed Patriarch of Constantinople in 428. He came to wide attention because he opposed the term Theotokos, which was used for the Virgin Mary. Theotokos is the Greek for Mother of God, and this word would be familiar to many of us through the form of it in the Hail Mary, Holy Mary, Mother of God. Literally though, Theotokos in Greek doesn't mean Mother of God, it literally means bearer of God, but functionally it means the same thing. Now Nestorius had a problem with referring to Mary as the mother or bearer of God, and I think we can appreciate his logic. God simply doesn't have a mother. God is eternal. God is not born of a human being in strict speaking. So to accommodate Mary being the mother of Jesus, who was also divine, he proposed calling her instead Christotokos, that is, the bearer of Christ. Now, no one saw anything wrong with calling Mary the bearer or the mother of Christ. What was wrong, though, was the implied denial of Theotokos, Mary being the bearer of God, because there was an implied denial of the divinity of Jesus. So against Nestorius we have the response of Cyril of Alexandria and the Council of Ephesus. Their key insight is that if Mary was not Theotokos, the mother or the bearer of God, then Jesus himself was not God, and that's something that denied the teaching of the Council of Nicaea. So Cyril, who was from Alexandria, thought that if Nestorius said that Mary was only the mother of Christ, then he imagined that Nestorius meant that Jesus must be divided effectively into two persons. He was, on the one hand, the divine Son of God, and the human Christ. Cyril was able to get the emperor and the bishop of Rome to call a council, and it occurred at Ephesus in 431. Now the history of the council, and if you're interested in this, I encourage you to read further. The history of the council is somewhat convoluted. Cyril presided over a session on June 22, 431, and at that session Nestorius was condemned. But several days later, John of Antioch and his bishops arrived at the council. They were somewhat offended. They were offended that they were left out, and they declared Cyril a heretic. Now, after 2 years backwards and forwards with negotiations and that sort of thing, everyone was reconciled except for Nestorius. So, looking at it in retrospect, Nestorius was condemned at the Council of Ephesus in 431. And despite the toing and froing between people who were offended and counter-offended and that sort of thing, his condemnation was upheld. After the council, and what's important is that after the council, even though this council defended a title used for Mary, the council's concern was not so much about Mary as it was about Jesus Christ. Because the thinking of Cyril and the council was that if Mary was not Theotokos, the mother or bearer of God, then Jesus is not God. If Mary was not Theotokos from the moment of Christ's conception, then it was believed that one would either be an Arian, denying the divinity of Christ, or one would be adoptionist, meaning that people believe that he acquired his divinity later in life. And so, after the Council of Ephesus was accepted, the scholars of the School of Alexandria were kept happy with the condemnation of Nestorius because it backed up the divinity of Christ. The members of the School of Antioch were happy because the two natures, divine and human, were recognized in Jesus Christ.